All right. Hi, my name's Ben. I'm the technical director of CLW, and we started a series where we're doing something of a video log where I wanted to try and record um, something about Andrea's journey. Andrea is our new practice director, and he's come from an architectural background, and he's doing this journey into the world of kind of niche waterproofing consultancy. And I think it's fascinating. Obviously Andrea is a competent professional, like many others that we work with. And I thought it would be interesting to see his insights as he gets more and more into waterproofing. What is it that he's learning, discovering? What are his reflections on how he's done things in the past as an architect, that sort of thing. So we're still trying to find our way. I don't know how useful this will be to lots of other people, but I think it would be interesting to many architects and engineers and project managers. So, Andrea, thank you for joining
Hi,
us
Ben.
again. Thank you for sharing your journey. I thought maybe a good question to start with is, since the last time we did one of these,
Hmm.
what's the biggest thing that you've learned about basement waterproofing?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Again, just like to echo what you just say. I think it's useful not just for ourselves, but actually like to share my experience and my view as an architect, as you say, like entering in the niche of waterproofing. So what I learned now it's been I think it's been like almost 2 months, 2 months and a half that I joined CLW, and then to admit I learned a lot. In terms of biggest waterproofing realization so far, um, I feel that as architect we tend to see the waterproofing as a system to solve a problem. Where I still like more and more, I do appreciate that actually waterproofing design, it's part of the strategy, and it's something that is not there to be applied to complete something, but it's actually part of the journey, part of the design. Which this is why it's needs to be taken into account at early stage when you start to take into account, for instance, like load, or for instance, tolerance, concrete sequences. Um,
Mm.
just because it's waterproofing, is not like, sort of like a fit out object, but needs to be taken into account during and also after. And also you have to maintain, you have to understand how to maintain, how to, again, going back to the sequencing, how to approach the sequencing, taking into consideration the waterproofing. Yeah,
Mm.
so I think like this is the biggest things so far that I, I learned.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think I often get the sense that waterproofing is something of an afterthought, as if it's just
Yeah,
do
sure.
everything else and then go and slap some paint or something, and then it will be waterproof.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
absolutely. It's like if you imagine waterproofing as a bespoke product to solve a problem
Mm.
of water. When instead like waterproofing design, it's actually want to coordinate and manage not just a problem, manage simply the surrounding of a building. So if you imagine your box, and your box you just like imagine a basement, you submerge into a pool. You have to understand how the context will go and react and behave with the building.
Mm.
So again, you're not trying to find a solution, try to understand how to make this building behave with the context. So it's poor management and coordination.
Yeah, that's great. And we spoke about you showed me even a waterproofing detail that you developed as when you were an architect.
Yeah.
Tell me about what is that like as an architect? Because my assumption is you go to university, you do 7 years of study or whatever, but I would assume that none of that covers basement waterproofing. And then you become an architect, and then somehow it gets into your scope that you've got to do the waterproofing. How do you do that? How do you know how to do the waterproofing?
So so if we make a step back, the as an architect during my journey, the first bit that get familiar to waterproofing, it's actually like at uni, you learn how to waterproof your envelope from outside. So you start to understand how to apply waterproof to the roof, to the walls, and maybe, depends on how good your cores are, you understand how to waterproof the foundation. However, they almost never they talk about basement, how to waterproof a basement. Or even if like you want to touch base to the basement, they don't really explain how, because the problem with waterproofing the basement is not the basement per se, but it is, of course, again, going back to the context, how to learn to read the context. This is something that you understand how to manage the rainwater flow, but not actually how to manage the water table from the ground. When I start like working as an architect, of course, like you start to get familiarized with waterproofing, start to prepare your own details, sometimes the wall, sometimes the roof. When it comes to basement, the only way that I learn how to design my details, it's either through experience, so learning from more experienced architect than me, or even like learning from expertise from site. Otherwise, like I would say like the most common route is going through a supplier. So you call a supplier and you say, okay, I have this one. I need waterproofing my basement. What I have to do? And the supplier, of course, like they are specialized on their own products. So meaning that they will tell you, okay, you have to put it this flyer, you have to put it like a membrane, you have to put it this one to make the space dry. Fine, I trust you because you tell me what I have to do it. I do, of course, I will do my diligence research. I might do comparison with other company, but pretty much, of course, you rely on the supplier expertise. This one, as you can imagine, to rely on supplier expertise, it means that, especially if because you're not a specialist, it means that you kind of trust that that system works because they guarantee the system. Now, the issue that I found like so far in many years of my experience is not that it's a bad advice of what they give you. It's sometimes it's over engineer or might not take into account in a holistic way the use of the space. So yes, the details that I was showing was like in that specific case was the section details of a light well and the window sill, and then there is of course the basement room bedroom. In that specific case, what we looking back on that details, I've seen that I followed the instruction, which was like using concrete at the time, just concrete. There was no really knowledge, or at least as an architect, of waterproofing concrete, at least not back then. And then I would apply slurry, perhaps like anti-lime products, a slurry, and then a membrane, a drainage membrane. Now, looking back, although this one might work in a totally dry environment in a bedroom, perhaps it's not the best place to use in a light well. Not because it's not useful, it's not like it's incorrect or it's wrong. It's just because it's over engineered for the use. It's a wet space, so why have to use it so much like a layer protection where actually it might not be necessary. Again, this is not a comment or critique to the supply company who recommend the details. It's just like perhaps going through a more independent approach, I might get the same solution, which actually would work better in terms of like cost and time on site, and still like achieve the same performance.
Yeah. So in that situation, you went to a waterproofing supplier and they said, do all of this in a light well. So you got a light
Yes,
well with a concrete, slurry, cavity drain
membrane.
membrane,
Yeah.
but it's just rain falls on it.
So basically, we create like a pool, a perfect seal pool, which
Yeah.
now I understand that looking back, of course, like when you take on board this kind of details, you want to make sure that there are no doubts, there are zero risk, especially because as an
Yes.
architect, you don't want to take risk. So
Yes.
you, even
Okay.
if you have to over engineer, you rather take
Yeah.
on engineer instead, like to have like the minimal doubts of risk. I do appreciate that, especially like in a small project, you tend to over-engineer. I do imagine and to be honest, if it's in a small project, perhaps that one ultimately the cost of saving is not huge. However, when it comes like for instance on project, a commercial project where there are like for I don't know 100 million of like of a development. So in that case, a different strategy which allows it to reduce perhaps one layer, perhaps it's a good saving in a long term.
Yes. Yeah. I think what you describe is a classic example of cheap or free advice turning out to be expensive, because
yes,
essentially the design advice is, oh, use my product and this other product and this other product, and you just didn't need to.
Yes, on this point, it's again as any other like supplier, they are very expert, like their expertise on what they're selling, what they do. And I don't get me wrong, I believe they what they sell, all the details, the works. Although what's happened that as an architect, then you take the details and then it's up to you as an architect to understand how the details coordinate with the rest. Because the detail per se works well on his own, but then you have to understand how react with other products, how react with the environment, how react with or how it needs to be sequencing on site. So all of this is something that you learn all for experience, or you of course rely on waterproofing design.
That's great. Okay. One last question then. What are you enjoying most at the moment working at CLW, or being in this industry even?
Okay, besides first of all, the projects actually, it's quite well, CLW works on a great project at the moment, which are very exciting project. Of course, we cannot disclose it too much, but quite nice sites in central London. And I think like I'm enjoying the most seeing how things fail. I've noticed that part of our like project or anyway like works comes from previous waterproofing design installed, which they have failed, or strategy which they failed. So they call us to understand what went wrong and how can we fix it. And again, this one, I guess, we go back to the first steps. It's like waterproofing is not a solution. It's supposed to be part of the overall picture, and the coordination is the beginning. So it's tricky to work with some issue at that stage. Although I think like this, to go back to your question, what I'm enjoying the most, it's seeing this kind of circle of issue that not taking on board a waterproofing specialist early stage, which then perhaps saves you a bit at the beginning in consultant fee, but then later stage, perhaps the consultant fee would be still the same, but what you as a investor spend the most is actually on net remedial works, which might affect finishes, use of space, time, a lot of headaches. So I think like that one, it was to enjoy the most, like seeing, understanding and the feel and recognized those things, which ultimately makes me, I cannot say that I'm a waterproofing specialist right now, but a better design in general, yes.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah, I agree. I think the forensic engineering, the looking at what's gone wrong.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I really wanted you to see was you get to site and you're trying to figure out what the as-built detail is, and then you start going through the O&M manual to try and find what is the waterproofing. And we were on that house together, and we go through the one folder and there's like, nope, it's nothing here. And then we get to the other folder and we're like, oh, found the waterproofing, and it's just this plan
There's an A4
sketch.
template and say, okay, yes, it's been installed.
Yeah. So I just think that's such a help. I wish every design professional in construction had to go and do that twice a year or something, so that they realize what goes into the O&M manual has to make sense.
I think it's
Well, that's great.
yeah. Funny enough, but it is true. I was I finished a project back then. I think like 6 years ago, and this one was a beautiful townhouse in central London, and you can see after, there is a normal like defect time, which it comes like perhaps it's some finish, some joinery, something here and there, and we're discussing at that time with the colleague and say yes, it would be nice if an architect, anyone who built or is in a construction industry lives in that place for at least 6 months to recognize a lot of what went wrong, what could be done better actually. So I don't know, perhaps like a way of approaching like sequencing or like some how to install or a lot of things.
Very good. That's great. Andrea, let's leave it there. Thank you. Thanks for sharing and your honesty and authenticity. Hope this is useful. If you are watching this and you think, oh, I wish Andrea would talk about XYZ, it'd be great to hear from you. Thanks.
Thanks, man.